Hold his head steady, Camden. If he wakes up, we just say he hit it during turbulence. He's not waking up. Look at him, drooling like a strayed dog. God, this hair is a tragedy. Pass me the clippers. Let's do the world a favor. The vibration was a dull hum against the skull, a mechanical hornet nest invading a dream. Laughter, sharp, cruel, and hushed, floated through the sterile air. Then came the sound of thick, coarse locks hitting the floor. Oops, went a little too close to the scalp. Guess we have to finish the job now. Wyatt Bennett adjusted the hood of his oversized charcoal sweatshirt, pulling it lower over his eyes as he stepped onto the jet bridge. The air in the terminal had been stale, recycled too many times, but the air in the tunnel leading to Aura Jet Flight 492 smelled distinctly of industrial cleaner and elitism. Wyatt was exhausted. It was a bone-deep, marrow-sucking type of tired that only came after a 72-hour coding sprint followed by a hostile negotiation in a Tokyo boardroom. He had just secured the acquisition of a semiconductor firm that would triple his net worth, which was already sitting comfortably in the mid-nine figures, but looking at him, you would never know it. He wasn't wearing his bespoke Italian suits today. He wasn't wearing the Patek Philippe watch that cost more than most people's homes. Today, he was just Wyatt, a 32-year-old black man in joggers and a hoodie, carrying a battered leather duffel bag that held sentimental value far outweighing its aesthetic. He wanted comfort. He wanted sleep. He wanted to get home to Chicago and disappear into his penthouse for a week. He reached the cabin door. The flight purser, a man with a smile as tight and artificial as the polyester blend of his uniform, stood guarding the entrance to first class like Cerberus at the gates of Hades. His name tag read, Camden Royce. Wyatt stepped forward, phone in hand with his digital boarding pass displayed. Economy is to your right, sir. Row 30 and back, Camden said instantly, his voice dripping with a practiced saccharine condescension. He didn't even look at Wyatt's phone. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the dreadlocks, thick, well-maintained, hanging to Wyatt's shoulders, and made a micro-expression of disgust that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Wyatt paused, blinking his dry eyes. I'm in 1A, he said, his voice raspy from disuse. He held the phone up. Camden Royce didn't move. He leaned against the bulkhead, crossing his arms. I think there's been a mistake. Seat 1A is reserved for our, premier clientele. The system often glitches with upgrades. I can find you a spot in row 12. It has extra leg room. Wyatt took a deep breath. He didn't have the energy for this. He never played the "Do you know who I am" card. He hated that card. But today, his patience was a fraying rope. Scan the code, Camden, Wyatt said, keeping his tone level. Camden bristled at the use of his first name. He snatched the scanner from the counter with an aggressive motion and aimed it at Wyatt's phone, clearly expecting the red light of rejection. Beep. Green light. Passenger. Bennett. Wyatt. Seat. 1A. Status. Elite. Camden stared at the screen, his jaw working silently. He looked back at Wyatt, his eyes narrowing not with apology, but with a deeper, more entrenched resentment. He had been proven wrong, and for a man like Camden Royce, that was an unforgivable offense. Right, Camden muttered, shoving the scanner back into its cradle. He didn't step aside. He merely rotated his shoulder an inch, forcing Wyatt to squeeze past him. Try not to disturb the other passengers. We have a quiet cabin policy. Wyatt ignored the jab and moved into the first-class cabin. It was plush, bathed in soft blue LED lighting, with lie-flat pods that promised the oblivion of sleep. He found 1A and tossed his duffel into the overhead bin. As he settled into the leather seat, he felt eyes on him. Across the aisle, an older woman clutching a pearl necklace looked at him as if he were a burglar casing the joint. But it was the crew that unsettled him the most. In the galley, just a few feet away, Camden was whispering to another flight attendant, Iris Hale. Iris looked hesitant, glancing at Wyatt with a furrowed brow. But Camden was animated, gesturing toward Wyatt's head with a sneer. "Can I get you a pre-departure beverage?" Wyatt looked up. It was a different attendant. A younger woman with a name tag that read Wren Donovan. Her smile seemed genuine, though her eyes darted nervously back toward the galley where Camden was holding court. "Water, please. No ice," Wyatt said. "We have champagne, sir. Dom Perignon," Wren offered kindly. "Just water. I need to sleep." "Of course." She returned a moment later with a crystal glass. As Wyatt took it, he caught Camden watching him from the shadows of the galley. The purser was twirling a pen in his fingers, his gaze fixed specifically on Wyatt's hair. It was a look of predatory calculation. Wyatt drank the water in one gulp. It tasted slightly metallic, but he chalked it up to his dehydrated palate. He reclined the seat, pulled the plush duvet over his chest, and closed his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but closing his eyes was the most dangerous thing he could have done. The cabin was dark. The hum of the engines was a hypnotic white noise that usually lulled passengers into a sense of security. But the atmosphere in the first-class galley was electric with malicious intent. Wyatt was out cold. The exhaustion, compounded perhaps by something extra in his drink, a heavy pour of melatonin or an antihistamine slipped in by a vindictive hand, kept him in a state of paralysis. He wasn't just sleeping, he was comatose, his breathing deep and rhythmic. Camden Royce stood over him. The cabin lights were dimmed to the night setting, casting long, eerie shadows across Wyatt's face. "He's out," Camden whispered, a grin splitting his face. "Look at him, acting like he owns the place, probably drug money, or some crypto scammer." "Camden, leave him alone," Wren Donovan whispered urgently, standing at the edge of the galley. She held a tray of dirty glasses, her knuckles white. "He paid for the seat. Just let him sleep." "Oh, lighten up, Wren," Camden snapped, his voice a hiss. "It's a long flight to Chicago. We need entertainment. Besides, look at this." He reached out and lifted one of Wyatt's locks with 2 fingers, holding it like it was contaminated waste. "It's a violation of the grooming standards. If he worked for us, he'd be fired on the spot. Unkempt. Dirty." "He doesn't work for us, Camden. He's the customer." "He's a joke," Camden corrected. He reached into his personal bag, which he had stashed in the crew locker. He pulled out a sleek, cordless grooming kit. "I brought these to trim my beard in the layover, but I think they're destined for a greater purpose." Iris Hale, who had been watching from the jump seat, giggled nervously. She was new, impressionable, and desperate for Camden's approval, as he was the senior purser with a direct line to management. "You wouldn't," she said, though her tone was more thrilled than horrified. "Watch me," Camden said. "We'll call it a stylistic correction, a turbulence accident." "Camden, seriously, stop." Wren stepped forward, blocking the aisle. "This is assault. You can go to jail." Camden's face darkened. He stepped close to Wren, invading her personal space. "Listen to me, you little rookie. I run this cabin. I know Hudson Crane personally. You think the CEO of Aurajet cares about one thug in a hoodie? If you want to keep your wings, you'll go to the back and check on economy. Now." Wren hesitated, tears of frustration pricking her eyes. She looked at Wyatt, sleeping defenselessly, then back at Camden's menacing glare. The power dynamic was absolute. With a choked sob, she turned and hurried toward the rear of the plane, cowardly but self-preserving. Camden turned back to his prize. He clicked the power button. Psst. The sound was low, masked by the engine drone. "Iris, hold the flashlight. I want to see what I'm doing," Camden commanded. Iris obeyed, pulling out a heavy-duty tactical torch and shining the beam onto Wyatt's scalp. The light illuminated the texture of his hair, the years of growth, the history woven into every strand. To Camden, it was just debris to be cleared. Camden didn't hesitate. He wasn't a barber. He was a butcher. He pressed the cold metal teeth of the clippers against Wyatt's temple. The first pass was aggressive. A thick lock of hair fell onto the expensive leather of the seat. Wyatt stirred slightly, a groan escaping his lips, his head lolling to the side. "Hold him!" Camden hissed. Iris, caught up in the adrenaline of the transgression, placed a hand firmly on Wyatt's forehead, pinning him down. "Look at that," Camden chuckled, the clippers moving faster now. "I'm doing him a favor. He's going to look so much more professional." Chunks of black hair rained down. They fell onto Wyatt's gray hoodie, onto the floor, onto the duvet. The distinct style Wyatt had cultivated for 7 years, a symbol of his journey, his patience, his identity, was being eradicated in seconds by a man who saw him as nothing more than a prop for his own amusement. Camden wasn't careful. He dug the clippers in, nicking the skin near the ear. A small bead of blood welled up dark against the skin. "Oops," Camden laughed softly. "Battle scar." They worked for 10 minutes. It was a jagged, uneven, humiliating job. Patches of scalp showed through where Camden had pressed too hard. Other areas were left as tufts of varying lengths. It looked like the work of a maniac. When the battery on the clippers began to whine, dying out, Camden stepped back to admire his work. Wyatt lay there, transformed, stripped. "Take a picture," Camden said, wiping a stray hair from his uniform sleeve. Iris pulled out her personal phone. Click, click. "Send that to the group chat," Camden grinned. "Caption it, 'The Fresh Prince of Midair.'" He carefully gathered the largest clumps of hair from the seat and shoved them into a motion sickness bag, which he tucked into the seat pocket in front of Wyatt. A final insult. "Let's go," Camden said, putting the clippers away. "Service is starting in 20 minutes. Wake me when he stirs. I want to see the look on his face." The descent into O'Hare was turbulent. The plane shuddered violently, jarring Wyatt from the black depths of his unnatural sleep. He woke with a gasp, his heart hammering against his ribs. His head felt light, physically light, and cold. There was a strange sensation of air moving across his scalp where there should have been warmth and weight. He sat up, groggy. His mouth tasted like cotton. He reached up to rub his head, a habitual motion he had done 1,000 times to push his locks back. His hand met skin. Wyatt froze. His fingers traced the jagged, prickly terrain of his scalp. He moved his hand further back. Nothing. Just stubble and uneven patches of hair. The breath left his lungs in a silent whoosh. He looked down. His hoodie was covered in tiny, itchy trimmings that they hadn't managed to brush away. He looked at the seat pocket. The white paper bag was stuffed full, a dark lock of hair protruding from the top like a dead thing. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He unbuckled his seatbelt, ignoring the illuminated sign, and stumbled toward the first-class lavatory. "Sir, you need to remain seated." Camden's voice came from the jump seat. Wyatt didn't look at him. He shoved the lavatory door open and locked it behind him. The LED lights of the bathroom mirror were unforgiving. Wyatt stared at his reflection. He didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked like an asylum patient. His hair, his crown, was decimated. Gouges of scalp were visible, a dried line of blood crusted behind his left ear. It wasn't just a haircut, it was a mutilation. It was an act of violence so intimate and bizarre that his brain struggled to process it. Why? He gripped the sides of the sink, his knuckles turning ash gray. The shock began to recede, replaced by a volcanic, terrifying rage. But Wyatt Bennett was a man who played chess, not checkers. He didn't scream. He didn't punch the mirror. He stared into his own eyes until the pupils constricted. "They think I'm nobody," he realized. "They think I'm powerless." He opened the door. The cabin was preparing for landing. Camden was strapped into his jump seat facing the aisle, Iris next to him. When Wyatt emerged looking like a survivor of a war zone, Iris clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a laugh. Camden didn't bother hiding his amusement. He smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "Rough sleep, sir?" Camden called out. "Looks like the turbulence really tossed you around." Wyatt stood in the aisle, bracing himself against the bulkhead as the plane dipped. He looked directly at Camden. He didn't speak. He memorized the man's face, the mole on his chin, the slightly crooked nose, the name tag. Camden Royce. Wyatt walked back to his seat. He picked up the sickness bag containing his hair. He folded it carefully and placed it inside his leather duffel. He took out his phone. He didn't have a signal yet, but he opened his camera. He took a selfie, capturing the damage. He took a photo of the seat, the trimmings on the floor. He turned and discreetly zoomed in to snap a photo of Camden laughing with Iris in the galley. The plane touched down with a screech of tires. As they taxied to the gate, the fasten seatbelt sign turned off. Wyatt stood up immediately. "Hope you enjoyed your flight with Orajet," Camden said as Wyatt passed him. "Maybe next time, try a barber before you board. Save us the trouble." Wyatt stopped. The entire cabin went silent. The old lady with the pearls gasped. Wyatt turned slowly. He stood 3 inches taller than Camden. He leaned in close, his voice a low rumble that only the two of them could hear. "You have no idea what you just cut," Wyatt said. "Excuse me?" Camden scoffed. "You didn't just cut hair, Camden," Wyatt said, his eyes void of any emotion. "You cut your own throat." Wyatt turned and walked out the door, the cold Chicago air hitting his scarred scalp. He didn't look back. He walked straight through the terminal, ignoring the baggage claim, ignoring the chauffeur waiting for him with a sign that read, "Mr. Bennett." He walked to the nearest luxury restroom in the terminal, locked himself in a stall, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Iris," he said when the line connected. Not the flight attendant. His attorney, Iris Hale, a shark in a Prada suit. "Wyatt, you sound terrible. Did the deal close?" "The deal is done," Wyatt said. "But I have a new project." "Oh, real estate? Tech?" "Aviation," Wyatt said, looking at the bag of hair in his lap. "I want to buy a jet. A lot of it." "Which company?" "Orajet." "And Iris?" "Find out everything you can about a flight attendant named Camden Royce. And find out who the CEO, Hudson Crane, is playing golf with this weekend." "Wyatt, what's going on?" "I'm going to burn it down, Iris," Wyatt whispered. "I'm going to burn it all down to the ground." The penthouse on the 45th floor of the Hancock Center was usually a sanctuary of silence and soft light. Tonight, it felt like a bunker. Wyatt Bennett sat in a high-backed Eames chair facing the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sprawling grid of Chicago lay beneath him, a galaxy of amber streetlights and moving headlights. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at his reflection in the darkened glass. He had finished the job Camden Royce started. He had taken a razor to his own scalp, removing the remaining patches of stubble until his head was completely smooth. The cut near his ear had been cleaned and bandaged, a stark white strip against his dark skin. Without his locks, his face looked sharper, his cheekbones more pronounced, his eyes more intense. He looked like a monk, or perhaps an executioner. The elevator doors hissed open. The sharp clack, clack, clack of heels on marble announced the arrival of Iris Hale. Attorney Iris Hale was a striking woman who wielded the law like a scalpel. She wore a midnight blue power suit that cost more than Camden Royce's annual salary. She carried a briefcase in one hand and a bottle of aged Japanese whiskey in the other. She stopped when she saw him. Her professional mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, revealing genuine horror. "Wyatt," she breathed. "Pour," Wyatt said, not turning around. She walked to the wet bar, poured 2 heavy glasses, and brought one to him. She sat on the adjacent sofa, her eyes scanning his scalp, noting the bandage. "I've already drafted the criminal complaint," Iris said, her voice turning to steel. "Assault, battery, unlawful imprisonment, emotional distress. We can bury Royce. I can have the Chicago PD at his door in an hour. No police, Wyatt said, taking the glass. He swirled the amber liquid. Not yet. If we arrest him now, Aurajet fires him, issues a press release apologizing for the rogue employee, and the news cycle moves on in 48 hours. Hudson Crane keeps his bonus. The airline keeps flying. Wyatt turned to face her. I don't want an apology, Iris. I want an autopsy. Iris raised an eyebrow. You mentioned debt. Aurajet is leveraged, Wyatt said. I did some digging while I was shaving my head. They expanded their fleet last year aggressively. They took out a bridge loan from tentative backers in Singapore to cover the new Boeings. The loan is distressed. The covenants are tight. And you want to buy the loan? I already made the call to the distressed asset manager. I'm buying the tranche at 90 cents on the dollar. By tomorrow morning, I won't just be a victim. I'll be their senior creditor. Iris smiled, a dangerous curve of red lipstick. You're going to call the loan? I'm going to squeeze them until they pop. A soft chime from the building's intercom interrupted them. Wyatt glanced at his tablet. Security says there's a woman in the lobby. Wren Donovan. She says she was on the flight. Wyatt's eyes narrowed. Let her up. 5 minutes later, Wren Donovan stood in the center of Wyatt's living room. She was still in her uniform, though she had removed the scarf and the jacket. She looked terrified. She clutched her phone with both hands like a shield. Mr. Bennett, she stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know where else to go. I looked you up online. Wyatt didn't stand. He studied her. You're the one who offered me champagne. I'm the one who didn't stop him, she whispered, tears spilling over. I'm so sorry. I tried, but Camden, he has this hold on everyone. He said he'd get me fired. Why are you here, Miss Donovan? Iris asked, stepping in. Wren stepped forward and placed her phone on the coffee table. Because they're laughing about it. They have a group chat for the first-class crew. Camden sent the photos. He made a meme out of it. Wyatt stared at the phone. He reached out and tapped the screen. There it was. A photo of him, unconscious, his head half-shaven, mouth slightly open in a drug-induced slumber. Camden had added a filter. The caption read, "The Fresh Prince of Midair. Who knew we offered barber services?" Your trash taken out. Beneath it were laughing emojis from other crew members, including the other flight attendant, the other Iris. Wyatt felt a cold fire spread through his veins. The humiliation was total, but the evidence was absolute. You realize, Iris said softly to Wren, that by giving us this, you're implicating yourself as a witness? You'll lose your job. I can't work there anymore, Wren said, wiping her face. Not with them. It's rotting from the inside. Hudson Crane, the CEO, he encourages it. He calls it maintaining the aesthetic. Camden is his favorite because Camden is ruthless. Wyatt looked up at Wren. You did a brave thing coming here. He looked at his lawyer. Iris, get Miss Donovan a severance package from my personal account, 3 years' salary, and get her a security detail. He stood up, towering over the room. He picked up Wren's phone. Send this to Blair, he commanded. Blair Knox did not sleep. The editor-in-chief of The Ledger, a digital media empire known for toppling politicians and exposing corporate malfeasance, lived on caffeine and chaos. When the file arrived from Iris Hale's encrypted server at 3 a.m., Blair was sitting in her loft in Tribeca, reviewing layouts. She opened the attachment. She read the summary. She looked at the photos. She set her coffee down. Holy hell, she whispered. She picked up her phone and dialed Wyatt immediately. Is this verified? She asked the moment he picked up. I have the metadata, the flight logs, and a witness willing to go on record. Wyatt's voice was calm, almost robotic. Wyatt, this is nuclear, Blair said, pacing her apartment. Aurajet positions itself as the pinnacle of luxury, the soul of travel. If we run this, it's not just a scandal. It's a cultural event. Racial profiling, assault, violation of bodily autonomy. It checks every box for a firestorm. I don't want a firestorm, Blair, Wyatt said. I want an extinction event. I want the headline to be undeniable. Give me 2 hours, Blair said. I need to draft the copy. We launch at 6 a.m. right when the morning commute starts on the East Coast. We'll catch the markets opening. 6 a.m. ST. The article went live on the Ledger. Headline, The Clippers' Edge. How Orajet staff drugged and mutilated a black tech tycoon for sport. The image of Wyatt, unconscious, shorn, vulnerable, was the banner. By 6:15 a.m., it was trending on Twitter X. By 6:30 a.m., the hashtag Boycott Orajet was the #1 topic globally. By 7 a.m., the cable news networks had picked it up. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all abandoned their scheduled programming. The reaction was visceral. The image was too shocking to ignore. It wasn't just a bad customer service experience, it was a violation of human dignity that tapped into a deep, ancestral fear. The idea that you could close your eyes in a space of luxury and wake up stripped of your identity resonated with millions. At 8 a.m., Wyatt Bennett posted a single video on his own social media channels, which had exploded from 50,000 followers to 2 million in 2 hours. The video was simple. Just him, sitting in his penthouse, the morning light hitting his shaved head. He spoke for 60 seconds. My name is Wyatt Bennett. Yesterday I paid $10,000 for a seat on Orajet Flight 492. I was tired. I fell asleep. While I slept, the purser, Camden Royce, decided that my hair, my culture, my crown, was a joke. He shaved me while I was unconscious. He took photos. He shared them. Orajet thinks this is funny. They think I am a joke. Today, I am asking you not just to look away. I am asking you to look closely, because if they can do this to me in Seat 1A, imagine what they think of you in 30C. The video was viewed 10 million times in the first hour. Orajet's stock price opened at $45. By 9:30 a.m., it was trading at $38 to $50, a 15% drop. Billions in market cap, vaporized. But the real damage was happening in the comments. People were sharing their own horror stories of Orajet. The floodgates had opened. The brand was toxic. Hudson Crane was having a bad morning. The CEO of Orajet was a man who believed the world existed to serve him. He was 55, tanned, silver-haired, and possessed a smile that cost 30 grand in veneers. He was currently in the back of his Maybach, stuck in traffic on the way to Orajet HQ in downtown Chicago. His phone had been vibrating nonstop since 6 a.m. Ignore it, he snapped at his PR director, Marcus, who was sitting opposite him, sweating through his suit. We can't ignore it, Hudson, Marcus said, his voice high and thready. The stock is in free fall. The video is bad. The photo is worse. It looks like a hostage situation. It's a haircut, Marcus, Hudson barked, slamming his hand on the leather armrest. It's a bad prank by a rogue queen. We fire the guy, we pay the darky a settlement, and we move on. Why is everyone acting like the plane crashed? Marcus went pale. Hudson, you cannot say that. You cannot say darky. What if that leaks? I'm in my car, Marcus. I can say what I want. Who is this guy anyway? Bennett? Wyatt Bennett, Marcus read from his tablet. Tech entrepreneur. Just sold his company to a Japanese conglomerate. Estimated net worth is $500 million. He's not some random passenger, Hudson. He has resources. Hudson waved a dismissive hand. New money. Flash in the pan. He'll take a check, draft a statement, say we are deeply disturbed, launching an internal investigation, and that diversity is our strength. The usual boilerplate. And get Camden on the phone. I want to know why he was stupid enough to take pictures. The car pulled up to the glass and steel monolith of the Orajet headquarters. Protesters were already gathering. A small group, mostly young, holding signs that read, "Hands off our hair and shut it down." Hudson sneered at them through the tinted glass as the car swept into the underground garage. He marched up to the executive suite on the top floor. The boardroom was full. The board of directors was on the video screen. They looked grim. "Hudson," the chairman said, his voice booming from the speakers. "This is a catastrophe." "It's a hiccup," Hudson said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "I'm handling it." "The FAA is opening an inquiry," the chairman said. "Assaulting a passenger mid-flight is a federal crime. They're talking about suspending our operating license for that route." "They won't," Hudson said confidently. "I played golf with the senator last week. I'll make a call." His secretary, a young woman named Sarah, entered the room. She looked pale. "Mr. Crane? There's a call on line 1. It's Wyatt Bennett." The room went silent. Hudson smiled. "See? He wants to deal. Put him on speaker." Hudson leaned back, clasping his hands behind his head. "Mr. Bennett, I was just about to call you. Terrible business, really. I want to personally apologize for the overzealous grooming habits of my staff." Hudson winked at Marcus. On the other end of the line, the voice was cool, deep, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Mr. Crane, I'm not calling for an apology." "Come now, Wyatt. Can I call you Wyatt? We're both businessmen. Let's cut to the chase. I'm prepared to offer you $5 million, tax-free, and a lifetime pass for first class. We issue a joint statement, you say it was a misunderstanding, and we all get back to work." There was a long silence on the line. $5 million, Wyatt repeated. "That's roughly the cost of the fuel for your transatlantic fleet for a week." "It's a generous offer," Hudson said, his tone hardening. "Take it, and this goes away. Fight me, and my lawyers will drag your reputation through the mud. We'll look into your finances, your past, your mental health. We'll say you were drunk, belligerent, that you asked for the cut. It's your word against my crew." "I don't think so," Wyatt said. "You see, Hudson, I didn't just look into your finances. I bought them." Hudson sat up straight. "What?" "The bridge loan from Singapore. The Series B bonds. I bought the debt this morning. I am now the majority holder of your short-term liabilities, and I'm reading the covenants right now. There's a morality clause in the loan agreement. Any event that causes significant reputational damage allows the creditor to call the loan immediately." Hudson felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "You can't do that. That's $300 million. We don't have the liquidity to pay that back instantly." "I know," Wyatt said. "That means you're in default." "You're bluffing," Hudson snarled. "You'd lose money. If we go under, you get pennies on the dollar." "I don't care about the money, Hudson," Wyatt said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I have plenty of money. This is about the principal. I'm calling the loan, Hudson. You have 24 hours to pay me $300 million, or I file for involuntary bankruptcy against Aurajet and I seize your assets, including the plane I flew on." "You're insane," Hudson shouted, standing up. "You're going to destroy a legacy company over a haircut?" "No," Wyatt replied. "I'm going to destroy it because you think it was just a haircut." The line went dead. Hudson stared at the phone. The board members on the screen were shouting, but he couldn't hear them. He looked out the window. Far below, he could see the protesters. And in the distance, he saw an Aurajet plane taking off from O'Hare, banking into the sky. For the first time in his life, Hudson Crane was afraid. The 24-hour clock didn't just tick. It hammered. Inside the glass monolith of Aurajet headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted from corporate anxiety to primal fear. It was 2 p.m., 6 hours after Wyatt Bennett's ultimatum. Hudson Crane was sweating through his third shirt of the day. His office, usually a pristine sanctuary of minimalist art and ego, was littered with financial reports and empty espresso cups. He was screaming into a headset. "What do you mean, compliance issues? We've banked with you for 10 years!" Hudson roared, pacing the length of his office. On the other end, the voice of the senior VP at Chase Manhattan was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Hudson. The risk profile has changed. The video is everywhere. Our ESG committee has flagged Aurajet as toxic. We can't extend the line of credit to cover the Singapore loan. It's a PR nightmare. It's a haircut, Hudson screamed, his voice cracking. It's one passenger. It's a brand collapse, Hudson. Your stock is down 40%. The FAA has grounded Flight 492 for forensic analysis. We're freezing your accounts pending the investigation. The line went dead. Hudson threw the headset against the wall. It shattered, a plastic casualty of a war he was losing. Downstairs, the siege was physical. The small group of protesters from the morning had swelled into a sea of thousands. They filled the plaza, spilling onto Michigan Avenue. The chants were rhythmic, thundering against the glass. Shut it down! Shut it down! Inside the terminal at O'Hare, the situation was even worse. Wren Donovan sat in her living room, watching the news coverage. The Chiron on CNN read, Aurajet pilots walk out in solidarity with victim. The image cut to the Aurajet terminal. It wasn't just passengers boycotting. The ground crew, the baggage handlers, the gate agents, the mechanics were walking off the job. Many of them were black, Latino, Asian, or just decent human beings who had watched the video of Wyatt Bennett and felt a sickening jolt of recognition. They stripped off their branded vests and dropped them in piles near the check-in counters. The airline wasn't just losing money, it was losing its pulse. Back in the penthouse, Wyatt Bennett watched the collapse on a bank of monitors. He looked calm, almost statuesque. The board is calling, Iris Hale said, glancing at her phone. They want a meeting. They're offering Hudson's head on a platter if you extend the deadline. No extensions, Wyatt said, not looking away from the screen. They had their chance to govern their CEO. They enabled him. They took the profits when he cut corners. Now they take the loss. They're saying innocent people will lose their jobs, Iris warned. The media narrative might shift. They'll paint you as the villain destroying livelihoods. Wyatt turned to her. I've already set up the transition fund. I'm buying the logistics arm of the company out of bankruptcy. I'll rehire the ground staff and the pilots under a new entity. But the brand? The name Aurajet? It dies tomorrow at 9 a.m. He walked to the window. Where is Camden? Iris checked her tablet. He didn't show up for his disciplinary hearing. His phone is off, but our private investigator picked up a credit card ping 20 minutes ago. Wyatt raised an eyebrow. He bought a one-way ticket to Dubai on Emirates, Iris said. Flight leaves in 2 hours. Wyatt picked up his phone. Call the detective. Tell him the barber is trying to skip town. O'Hare International Airport was a chaotic ecosystem on a good day, a symphony of rushing feet and rolling wheels. Today, it was a frenzy, and for Camden Royce, it was a hunting ground. Camden moved through the dense crowd of Terminal 5, his head tucked low. He wasn't wearing his signature-fitted uniform with the gold wings. Instead, he was drowning in a generic, scratchy gray hoodie he'd bought at a gas station, paired with oversized sunglasses that kept slipping down his sweat-slicked nose. He looked less like a traveler and more like a fugitive in a B-movie. Paranoia clawed at his throat. Every announcement over the PA system sounded like an indictment. Passenger Royce to security echoed in his mind, though the speakers were only announcing gate changes. He passed a sports bar where a muted TV screen flashed his face, a photo from his employee profile, smiling smugly, next to the headline, Manhunt for the Barber of Aurajet. A woman standing near the bar pointed at the screen, whispering to her husband. Camden flinched, pulling his hood tighter. He felt radioactive. The world, which had once been his stage, was now a closing vice. Dubai, he chanted internally, a desperate mantra. I'll go to Dubai. I have friends there. I can work on a yacht. I can disappear. He reached the security checkpoint. The line was long, snake-like. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, the rhythm erratic and painful. When he finally reached the podium, he tried to summon his old charm, the customer service mask that had saved him 1,000 times. Just a quick trip, he mumbled, handing his passport to the TSA agent. The agent, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took the document. She didn't smile. She scanned the passport, her eyes flicking to the screen. Then she paused. The pause stretched for an eternity. She looked at the screen again, typing something. A silent alert had popped up, flashing in red, Person of Interest, Chicago PD Warrant, 4922, Flight Risk. She looked up at Camden, her eyes narrowed, stripping away his disguise. "Sir, please step aside." "Is there a problem?" Camden asked, his voice trembling, cracking on the last syllable. "I'm in a hurry. My flight." "Just a random check, sir. Step over here." She reached for her radio. Camden hesitated. He looked past the checkpoint to the freedom of the duty-free shops, the shimmering mirage of the gate that led to the Emirates flight. Then he looked behind him. Two Chicago police officers were weaving through the crowd, their eyes scanning faces with predatory precision. One of them held a printed photo. It was him. Camden panicked. Logic evaporated. The reptilian brain took over. He grabbed his passport from the counter, snatching it from the agent's startled grip, and bolted. "Runner!" the TSA agent shouted, her voice cutting through the terminal noise. "Code orange at checkpoint 3. Camden sprinted back toward the ticketing hall. He wasn't an athlete. He was a bully in borrowed clothes. He crashed into a luggage cart, sending a tower of suitcases sprawling. A child screamed. A coffee cup flew through the air, splashing hot liquid across the floor. "Camden Royce! Stop!" The shout was close. Too close. He didn't stop. He burst through the automatic sliding doors, lungs burning, and spilled out onto the curbside pickup area. The cold Chicago wind hit him like a slap. He looked wildly for a taxi, an Uber, a shuttle bus, anything with wheels. A sleek black SUV screeched to a halt, directly in front of him, blocking his path. The window rolled down with a smooth, electric hum. It wasn't a taxi. Wyatt Bennett sat in the back seat. He was illuminated by the harsh sodium lights of the airport, looking like a judge presiding over the end of the world. His gaze was terrifyingly calm, devoid of anger, filled only with a cold, absolute finality. Camden froze. The universe seemed to contract to this single, impossible moment. His legs gave out, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of the realization that he had never been running away from Wyatt. He had been running towards him. "Going somewhere?" Wyatt asked, his voice low, barely carrying over the idling engine. "You," Camden stammered, backing away until he hit the concrete pillar behind him. "You ruined my life. You destroyed everything." "I just gave you a haircut, Camden," Wyatt said, the irony sharp enough to draw blood. "You ruined your own life when you picked up the Clippers. You thought you were untouchable because you were at 30,000 feet. But gravity always wins." Before Camden could run again, the police officers tackled him from behind. He hit the concrete hard, his cheek scraping against the grit. The sunglasses flew off, skittering under the SUV. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Camden shrieked, reverting to his old arrogance even as the metal cuffs bit into his wrists. "Camden Royce, you are under arrest for aggravated battery, unlawful imprisonment, and hate crimes enhancements," the officer recited, hauling him to his feet. As they dragged him away, kicking and screaming about how he was just following orders, and it was just a joke, Wyatt watched. He didn't smile. He just nodded to the officer, then rolled up the window. "One down," Wyatt said to the driver. "Take me to Aura Jet." Meanwhile, in the executive suite of the Aura Jet Tower, Hudson Crane was trying to orchestrate his own escape. Not a physical one, he was too cowardly for a foot chase, but a financial evacuation. He was frantically transferring personal assets to offshore accounts in the Caymans. His fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat dripping from his nose onto the mahogany desk. He looked aged, his tan sallow, his silver hair disheveled. 3 million, 5 million, transfer. He needed to liquidate before the freeze hit. He needed a lifeboat, He picked up his phone and dialed the senator. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed his golfing buddy at the FAA. Disconnected. "Cowards!" Hudson screamed at the empty room. "Parasites!" The heavy oak doors burst open. It wasn't the police. It was the board of directors, physically present for the first time in years. Leading them was Sterling, the chairman, a man who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. Behind them stood federal agents in windbreakers that read SEC and FBI. "Hudson Crane," Sterling barked, his voice echoing in the silent office. "You're fired, effective immediately, for gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and destroying shareholder value." "You can't fire me!" Hudson shrieked, standing up, knocking his expensive ergonomic chair over. "I built this company. I am Aurajet." "And you destroyed it in a day," Sterling spat. "You're not a CEO, Hudson. You're a liability." An FBI agent stepped forward, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Mr. Crane, step away from the computer. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and falsifying loan applications to the Singapore bank. It seems you didn't disclose the true state of your liquidity." Hudson slumped. The fight drained out of him, leaving him looking small and pathetic. He looked back at the computer screen one last time. The transfer bar was stuck at 99%. Connection failed. The lights in the office flickered and died. The power to the building had been cut. In the darkness, the only sound was the click of handcuffs. The deadline arrived at 9 a.m. the next morning. The sun rose over a changed landscape. The stock market opened, and Aurajet, ticker Aura, was halted. Trading suspended indefinitely. The once mighty giant was now a carcass to be picked clean. In the federal bankruptcy court, a judge signed the order with a stroke of a pen. Wyatt Bennett's holding company, Phoenix Logistics, was granted emergency control of Aurajet's assets as the senior creditor. The takeover was hostile, total, and immediate. Wyatt didn't go to the court. He went to the source. He walked onto the vast concrete floor of Hangar 1. The air smelled of jet fuel, industrial solvent, and anxiety. The flagship aircraft, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner that had carried him on Flight 492, sat in the center of the cavernous space. It looked like a beached whale, stripped of its dignity. Scaffolding surrounded the plane. Technicians were already at work, but they weren't servicing the engines. They were on cherry pickers, armed with heat guns and scrapers, peeling the vinyl decals off the fuselage. The sound was distinct, a tearing, ripping noise, like a giant bandage being removed. The giant gold Aurajet logo was being stripped away, revealing the bare, cold aluminum beneath. Wyatt stood watching, hands deep in the pockets of his black wool coat. He wore a simple beanie over his shaved head. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a mourner at a funeral, though he was the one who had dug the grave. Footsteps echoed on the concrete. It was Blair Knox. She had her camera crew with her, but she signaled them to stay back at the perimeter. She walked up to Wyatt alone. "It's done," she said quietly. "Hudson is in federal custody without bail. They found the offshore accounts. Camden is facing 10 years. The DA wants to make an example of him. The airline is dissolved." "The airline is dead," Wyatt corrected, his eyes fixed on the peeling logo. "The people are still here." He gestured to the far side of the hangar. A massive group of pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, and gate agents were gathering. Hundreds of them. They looked exhausted, terrified, and uncertain. They whispered among themselves, eyeing Wyatt with a mixture of awe and resentment. They were the collateral damage of Hudson's arrogance, and they expected the axe to fall on them next. Wyatt walked over to them. The murmurs died down, replaced by a heavy silence. A senior pilot, Captain Miller, stepped forward. He was a gray-haired man with 30 years of service. "Mr. Bennett," he said, his voice steady but strained. "We need to know. Are we out on the street? Most of us have pensions tied up in this company. We didn't hold the clippers." Wyatt looked at Miller, then at the sea of faces behind him. He saw Wren Donovan at the front, looking pale. "I know you're scared," Wyatt said, his voice projecting clearly through the hangar without a microphone. "You think I did this to destroy you. You think I'm here to strip the copper from the walls and sell the planes for scrap. I didn't do this to kill the airline. I did this to cut out the rot." He paused, letting the words settle. Hudson Crane treated this airline as his personal playground. He treated you as servants, and he treated passengers as jokes. That ends today. He turned to Wren. "Ms. Donovan, step forward." Wren hesitated, then took a shaky step. "The brand Aurajet is gone," Wyatt announced, turning back to the crowd. "It stood for exclusion. It stood for arrogance. It is toxic. Starting today, this fleet flies under a new banner, Onyx Air." A ripple of confusion and curiosity went through the crowd. "Onyx Air will be structured as an employee-owned trust," Wyatt continued. "I am putting up the capital to stabilize operations, but you will own 49% of the equity. You will have seats on the board. You will draft the new grooming standards. You will write the code of conduct." Shock registered on their faces. This wasn't a takeover, it was a liberation. "And Ms. Donovan here," he nodded to Wren, "will be your new chief of customer experience. She was the only one in that cabin who remembered that a passenger is a human being. That is the standard now." Wren gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Mr. Bennett, I'm not an airline guy," Wyatt said, addressing the room. "I'm a tech guy. I build systems. But you run the planes. And the first rule of Onyx Air? No one is invisible. No one is a joke. If you see something wrong, you speak up, and you will be protected." He walked back toward the plane. A technician on the lift ripped the final piece of the gold A from the tail. It fluttered down to the concrete floor like dead skin. Wyatt walked over and picked up the piece of scrap vinyl. It was crinkled, cheap plastic that had masqueraded as luxury. He crushed it in his hand. He touched his shaved head. The hair would grow back, but the lesson he had carved into the industry, that would last forever. The collapse of Aurajet became a business school case study overnight. It was taught as the ultimate example of reputational risk in the digital age. But to the public, it was something more visceral. It was a fable about the shifting dynamics of power. Wyatt Bennett didn't just sue, he conquered. He proved that dignity has a market value, and when you strip it from someone, the cost is infinite. 6 months later, Wyatt sat in seat 1A of the inaugural Onyx Air flight to Tokyo. His hair had grown back into a short, neat fade, the start of a new journey. The crew didn't bow to him. They shook his hand. As the plane banked over Chicago, leaving the ghost of the old empire behind, Wyatt closed his eyes. This time, he slept peacefully. He knew that when he woke up, he would still be himself. They thought they could take his crown and leave him with nothing. Instead, they handed him the kingdom. Wyatt Bennett showed the world that the sharpest weapon isn't a pair of clippers. It's the truth, wielded without mercy. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice and corporate karma, make sure to hit that like button. It helps the channel faster than a private jet. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you woke up in seat 1A?